We should be a top 5 offensive team and a top 10 defensive team.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and as always you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. A special edition of the podcast, a special episode of the podcast. We're going to be talking all things Los Angeles Lakers, and to do that I am joined by the courtside reporter for the Los Angeles Lakers and the co-host of the Thompson and Trudell show. It is Mike Trudell. Mike, welcome to the show.
Josh, my pleasure to be here. I am obsessed with fantasy basketball, so I'm looking forward to this chat.
I'm also joined, of course, by my Basketball Monster cohort, Kyle McEwen. Kyle, welcome into the show as well.
Hey, thanks. I know you shared all that really great stuff about Mike being the Lakers courtside reporter and everything, but I think, Mike, you spilled the beans already. The most interesting thing about you is the fact that you actually play fantasy basketball, so that's what I want to talk to you about.
Yeah, I've been playing for years to the point where, in high school, I used to get the actual newspaper, the only way we could get box scores. This is back in the late 90s. And, back in the time when Scottie Pippen was the best overall fantasy basketball player, if you added up all the categories, he was even better than Jordan a couple of years because of all the steals and blocks and all the intangibles that Scottie did. Now, this is well before you had online leagues, so I go way back with my fantasy basketball love, man.
Wow, dude, I had no idea that you were that OG about fantasy basketball. I'm really impressed. I don't even know where to take it from there, so I'll leave it to you to even expound on that. I mean, right now you're playing in 2 leagues. Who do you play in those leagues with, and is there anything different about those leagues than a standard 8-cat league that somebody would play in?
Well, I play in a couple of really competitive leagues, actually. So it's what's the best way to put it? So there are 14-team leagues. One is a keeper league, one is not. The only difference between the two is that one of the leagues has turnovers and the other doesn't. And it's a bunch of people who cover the Lakers or who cover the NBA or who work for the Lakers. It's a very kind of Los Angeles-centric one. And then the one that I am the commissioner for, we call it True Hoop. I just took the E out because my last name is Trudell, obviously. And for that league, let's see, we've been doing it for, I want to say, almost 10 seasons now, maybe 9 seasons. And that one's fun. I mentioned it's a keeper league. So the last couple of years, you can keep a guy for 3 years max. And I'm on my last year of Whiteside and Gobert, so they've been kind of the stalwarts. But I had to give the Greek Freak back. Those are my 3 keepers for the last couple of years. So needless to say, I've been fortunate in that league, and I'm gonna have to rebound after I lose my studs after this year.
Just a very quick moment of silence for you for the fact that you had to lose the Greek Freak going into this season.
That was hard.
Brutal, man.
I know. He's probably gonna go number
Josh.
1 or number 3. Yeah. Go ahead, Josh.
How many times have you won the league, if any?
I've won the league several times. I like to. I don't want to give myself too much credit because part of it is just effort. I am working at these NBA games, of course, for the Lakers on the road and at home. And then when we're on the East Coast, I actually prefer to be on the West Coast because then I can watch all of the early games while I'm kind of getting into the warm up. So I literally half the time that I'm there, I will have the league pass up on my phone. And then 3 seconds before I have to interview Luke Walton for the TV network, I will kind of put it in my pocket begrudgingly. So it really, to be good at fantasy basketball, I'm sure it's the same way for you guys. You just have to watch games. I mean, it's one thing to look at the stats, and that obviously helps, and all that there's no question. But I think that I find for me the best way to kind of know who's playing well and who might be coming on and et cetera is to watch games. And that's how I found Whiteside kind of like a week earlier before he started to get picked up, because you're watching a Heat game, you're like, wait, why is this guy? Why have I never heard of him before, other than playing in the D League? Why is he so good? And I think that's to me that's been the best strategy. It's just been to watch basketball a lot.
Well, piggybacking off of that then, so you've obviously been there watching the Lakers preseason games, and we'll talk about the Lakers in a second, but the teams that have come in and that you've seen take on the Lakers this preseason, who stood out? Who's a guy that you've seen in those teams that the Lakers have taken on where you've gone, oh, you know what, maybe this guy's going to do something this season, or this guy is looking much better than I anticipated? Who's like your guy, your white side from the preseason for this year?
Josh, so that's a good question, because that's actually how I first fell in love with Rudy Gobert. I guess it would have been Rudy's rookie year, and he didn't even play that season, but he checked in off the bench and just completely destroyed the Lakers lineups. He was blocking everything. He was all over the place. He was still really raw offensively, but he was just such a freak out there. I kind of kept him on my radar, and I'm like, okay, I have to draft this guy next year, or just be ready to pick him up. And it turned out that summer, remember when Gobert played against the Spanish national team when Spain was still really good, and he basically shut down the Gasol brothers? And still, this is before he had meaningful NBA minutes, so that's a long-winded story to get into your answer for this year. I would say that nobody's going to be surprised that Towns looked great even in limited minutes, because the Lakers did play the Timberwolves. But the guy that probably is starting to be no longer slept on, most people are aware of him, but Gary Harris. Gary, this was before he had signed his extension, and Harris scored 25 points in about 20 minutes. He hit a bunch of threes. He's just smooth, man. He's still getting better. He's a player who I believe he was a high school football player and kind of got into basketball late, and so he's still improving at a higher rate. So Harris is a guy that I've been targeting earlier than what the ADP is for most leagues that I'm in. He's probably been the guy that I've been impressed with. It wouldn't be an obvious one. Look, Juancho Hernan-Gomez also, but that just depends on how many minutes he's going to get, probably backing up Wilson Chandler. If something happened to Wilson Chandler, I would love Juancho on a lot of my teams too.
Yeah, look, Harris is a guy that we've been pretty big on pretty much all preseason. Like, you're looking at him 40, 50 spots ahead of his ADP. And Juancho is an interesting one. Actually, the Nuggets in their last preseason game, they barely played a backup power forward. They played Juancho at the backup 3 and the backup 4 with Freed and Lyles barely. I don't think Lyles even got into the game, and Freed played like 6 minutes. So they went with a smaller rotation and allowing Juancho to get more of those minutes. But yeah, I'm with you on him. I'm with you on Gary Harris as well. It's good to see someone who's there literally right on the court, seeing these guys play and echoing the opinions that we had on those players. Do you know of any other broadcasters, Mike, that are playing fantasy? You said you're in a league with other Lakers guys. I know there are a couple of broadcasters that I've spoken to who do play fantasy. Look, are there any others that you know across the league?
Well, listen, so our play-by-play guy, Bill McDonald, has been in my league for a long time and definitely knows his players, definitely knows his basketball. Then there are some broadcasters like Steve Mason is joining. I just pulled into the league this year. Mason does the Mason Ireland show, the biggest talk show in LA. So we're gonna enjoy having him in the league. You guys probably know Zach Harper, who's been doing all kinds of things for all kinds of different sites and podcasts lately. Harper's joined the league this year, so we've got some people that are certainly known. But I would say that it's still less common to have some of the play-by-play guys who are, look, I would say average play-by-play guy age in the NBA is going to be, mid-40s to mid-50s probably. And now there are some younger ones, but most people, that skips the generation of us that even played in high school, and certainly the turn to play online. So I've found that there are fewer of those guys that play, but it's my mission to keep trying to bring more and more in, once they can figure out how to actually access the teams on their phones and such, which is a thing.
Now, I was going to say if you have any questions for us about fantasy, but given that you've been playing it longer than both of us probably combined, it's probably unlikely that you have any questions that you want to throw to us about your leagues. You seem like you've got it all under control.
I got a question.
All right, let's go.
I got questions for you. Look, so I have my draft tonight, right? And for the league that I've been talking about, and I've got the 13th pick, unfortunately, out of 14 teams. So now, keep in mind also that some of the best players are not there because we have 3 rounds of keepers, meaning so there are 14 teams, and each team is keeping 3 guys. So a guy that would typically go in the 5th round is probably going to go in the 3rd or something like that. It works, right? So the guys on my team, I've got Whiteside, Gobert, and Gary Harris. I mentioned Harris. I actually have him as a 6th round keeper. And let's see, Whiteside would be I think he's in the 12th, and Gobert is in the 11th, something like that. So what I'm trying to figure out at 13, I'm kind of targeting a wing, just because there are so many good point guards. I figure I can get that back in the 2nd round, whether it's a Lillard or a Chris Paul or a Wall, like whoever's left, or a Wall. But there are only so many of those elite wings. So I wondered where you guys think that the true kind of big two-way
You can.
I mean, I think it's weird, kind of like if you get LeBron or you get Paul George or you get Kawhi or Kevin Durant or Giannis, one of those guys early. I think you can kind of let a lot of the small forwards go because there are a lot of point guards in the middle rounds. There's some shooting guards in the middle rounds you're going to like. There's some big men in the middle rounds you're going to like. And then you're getting into the later rounds and yeah, there's a lot of small forwards to consider. Taurean Prince and Tim Hardaway Jr. if he has eligibility there. Josh Richardson. I'm sure we could list a bunch more. T.J. Warren.
Kyle, you know what's funny? Those four that you just listed are all already kept. Right?
Exactly.
Those guys are all. Yeah, so that's my issue. And I don't think Durant, Kawhi, they're not going to be there, right, at pick number 13. I guess there's a chance, like a guy that I was sort of targeting would be possibly Jimmy Butler. Just thinking that somebody might be nervous about him, about Wiggins taking stats away from him. But I actually don't think Wiggins is. I will not touch Wiggins this year because I think Jimmy Butler is not messing around, and he's going to be the more dominant player who's going to play a ton and who's going to have the ball. So, but I'm just not sure if he's there. And if he goes, then I'm almost thinking, man, then I don't know what small forward I'm going to get.
I think if Butler would be the guy that I'd look for there in that range of, I'm with you. I don't have too much doubt that he's going to be asserting himself over Wiggins. But after he's gone, like the next guy that we've got listed there is Paul George. And obviously there's some concerns with how he works in terms of usage drop. We're playing alongside Westbrook. But after that, the wings dry up really quickly and it becomes a real bunch of point guards and big men. You could look at a guy like Bradley Beal, perhaps. That might be a little bit earlier, or CJ McCollum in that area. But given the guys that you've got there, looking at a guy like Lillard, if he's there, that's the perfect sort of player, I would imagine, in that sort of spot. But Jimmy Butler's an interesting wing. But as Kyle said, if you can get some of these later round wings, there are quite a few. Whereas the big men and the point guards, the quality dries up. Even though there are some good to decent point guards in those mid to later rounds, like Jeremy Lin, Darren Collison, George Hill in that sort of zone as well.
Yeah, do people actually value Rondae Hollis-Jefferson in the league? Is he somebody who's going to be available?
I mean, this is my whole concern though is that since I'm so big with my keepers, like I don't need another center really.
Yeah.
I could use one I guess off the bench, but Gobert and Whiteside only have center eligibility. I can't play them at forward, so I don't. The last thing that I want to do then is take DeAndre, who I might consider in a different spot there because he's just kind of superfluous to my needs. So if I guess you can always trade later. It's just that if I don't get any of these big wings, that's my sort of main worry. Aside from like trading one of my centers to somebody to move up, which I don't think is likely to do. So that's my main dilemma. But aside from that, I'm. It's funny when you think about building a roto team too, because if the keepers sort of influence that a lot. And I was hoping to get, if I just had gotten like even the number 10 spot, I would have been fine. But 13 is a little. For a second there.
Yeah, we've got you back now.
Oh, sorry. I'm just going around. You'll have to excuse me. I'm actually driving to Lakers practice right now through the LAX tunnel, which is usually a cell phone killer.
Yeah, we need you to hurry up and get there so we can get that Lonzo information.
Yeah, well, so exactly. That's the biggest reason that I'm going today. I mean, look, Lonzo didn't practice yesterday, which was Wednesday, and I'm not anticipating that he did much today, so I don't think he's going to play Friday. I think they're going to wait to debut him in the regular season debut, which is next Thursday. So that's to me the most likely scenario. I'd be surprised if we saw him Friday, but they haven't ruled it out yet.
If he's not ready to go, Mike, say for the opener, which it appears like that's a long shot at this point. Like, what are the Lakers going to do? Because they're already going to be missing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope there, so Jordan Clarkson's going to have to move into that starting shooting guard role. Will it just be Tyler Ennis, or do they play Brandon Ingram as they did earlier or later last season as a primary ball handler? Like, what's the idea that they will, or how will they look to go there if Lonzo isn't ready for that season opener?
I think he's going to be ready for the opener. I do. The indications have been that they've been conservative in part because they want to make sure that he's ready for that game. And remember, we still do have the Lakers don't play until Thursday. I know some teams start the season on Tuesday, so the Lakers have really a full week to get him going, and he's already made some progress on the ankle. So I think we'll see Lonzo in the opener. As for the KCP spot, Michael Thompson and I were talking about this today, and it'd be kind of fun if they moved Ingram to the 2 and started Kuzma.
Yep.
Now, I think that would be a little antithetical. Like, it would be a tough thing for Luke Walton, who's already going to be starting, one rookie in Lonzo, Brandon Ingram, who just turned 20, who's probably the second youngest, or at least probably the youngest second-year player, and then another rookie. But it's, at least in terms of merit, I don't care what the position is. Kuzma, I think, has played the best, certainly in the preseason. So that might be unexpected. Maybe they're more likely to just go with Clarkson and have him fill in for KCP. But I kind of like the idea of throwing Kuz in there and just let him get going right away, guys. Because I'm sure he's been, if you've been doing mock drafts and stuff, I'm sure that he's been going a couple of rounds each week higher, right? With it now, because I haven't done a lot of mock drafts yet, but I'm assuming that people are trying to get their hands on Kuzma.
Yeah, that's the hype around him is pretty insane. Like, with some of the stuff he's been doing, it's been fantastic. And initially, what he was doing is shooting at these unsustainably high rates, but it's dropped off, and he's still scoring in that manner. So people are super excited. But we try to preach, I guess, caution, or to reduce some of the hype some of the time, just because of the guys who are around him with Nance and Randall. But it has appeared that Walton seems to be like he's going to be pushing Julius to the bench. That's what seems to be the move. We saw that in the last game where Nance started, Randall played fewer minutes than both Kuzma and Nance in that situation. Do you see that Kuzma has already pushed himself ahead of at least one of those guys?
Well, let's see. So in terms of fantasy production, right? Because that's what we're
Yep.
focused on here. The good news for Kuzma is that he can play the 3 or the 4, and in certain lineups, look, not that he's going to be guarding a lot of 5s necessarily, but there are going to be a lot of teams that don't even bother playing a center, and in that case, why not have Kuzma in that spot? So I'm bullish on Kuzma getting minutes this year, and that usually is the biggest thing that we look for in fantasy. And since he has such a kind of wide variety of skills, there's no reason to think that Kuzma. And by the way, I'm just entering the Lakers security gate here. You guys got to check out this facility; it's ridiculous. By the way, the new one. As there's no reason to think that Kuzma isn't going to get consistent minutes wherever it might be. Is it backup 3? Is it backup 4? At some point, does he start? I don't care, but I know that he's going to be playing, and that is an uncommon thing for most rookies, right? And look, he's 22, he's polished. I have no real hesitations on drafting Kuzma, even if you have to reach a little bit for him, which I wouldn't usually say about rookies. And so I do believe that the hype is real for this guy.
Hey, Mike, with Ingram, his what's going to keep him on the floor this year? Like, is there anything that he can do where Walton might actually take some of his minutes away, or even consider moving him to the bench, or is that just there's no way that'll happen?
Look, I don't think there's any real scenario in which Ingram's not going to get minutes. I don't. I think that Ingram, sure, he has struggled a little bit in the preseason so far, but I think that in fact, I think he's kind of a buy low candidate if you're in a league where people think that Ingram just isn't ready yet. Because in one sense he's not. Like, in one sense he still doesn't need to make a lot of progress, but at the same time he's going to get regular minutes. He's going to get better month by month. So I almost wouldn't be opposed to the strategy of like if somebody still likes the hype and they want to draft him because he's a Laker and he's a former number 2 pick and there was some offseason hype on him, great. And then once he has a little bit of a slow start maybe, then trade for him, because he's definitely going to get better as the season goes on, just like he did last year. He's got plenty of skills, guys. He can do a little bit of everything on the court for you. He might hurt your field goal percentage a little bit, and that's something I'm always wary of, especially in roto leagues. But with all of that said, I do believe in him as a talent, and I think he's going to keep getting better as the season goes on.
Do you think that what we saw from him in that second half of last season, where he was running the offense as a pseudo point guard, is that something that he's going to be working on more this season, and Walton's going to be using that maybe as the backup point guard, considering that Tyler Ennis is really the only other point guard on this roster? Do you think he'll be looking to run Ingram with some of those second units and running things, or if Lonzo happens to sit, giving him a lot more primary ball handling responsibilities?
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll do it from time to time, guys, but I don't think it'll be as regular as it was last year, because they do like Ennis, and Ennis, I think, has a chance to, like, they really want to establish the way that Lonzo plays as a team style. And I think rather than having Ingram get out of that role that he's going to be in with Lonzo, I think they'd rather have Innis just do as close of approximation as he can to running that kind of open system and really popping the ball around. And that's not, they're asking Ingram to do a little more scoring, I think, than that. So from time to time, I think it's good for Ingram to put the ball in his hands and let him create, because that is the skill set he has. But I wouldn't expect big assist numbers from him this year, really, because look, this Lakers team is going to need his scoring.
Do you think that Magic Johnson's public expectations put the pressure on him, and that's causing him to force some things this preseason?
So Luke Walton was asked this question the other day, and I'll just sort of defer to his answer on it. And what he basically said was, maybe a little, but so what, right? Like this is the NBA, guys. I mean, like pronunciations from ownership or from the general manager or from the coach or from your best friend or whatever. All of that stuff can be taken to some degree, but ultimately it's on how much these guys really want it themselves. And the reason that I think Ingram is feeling pressure is because he wants to be great. It's not just because Magic wants him to be great or the Lakers want him to be great. He's putting some of the pressure on himself, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that it might lead to him having a couple of games that are rougher than earlier in the season. But again, so what? What the Lakers are ultimately looking to do with Ingram, with Lonzo Ball, is to establish them as future stars that other players are going to want to come join, especially under max money. And whether they lose a couple of extra games or win a couple of extra games this year, I'm sure they'd prefer to win them, but that's not at the sacrifice of developing Ingram and Ball. So that's again, it's another long-winded way of answering your question. But I don't see it as a massive concern that you have a little pressure on you, because if you're drafted 1 or 2 overall for the Lakers or for anybody, but especially the Lakers, the pressure's always going to be there.
Hey, Mike, you rolled into my DMs after the Utah game talking about Donovan Mitchell.
You can say slid. You can say slid. It's cool.
Oh yeah, you slid into my DMs.
Yeah.
So what'd you see in Donovan Mitchell's awesome performance the other night?
Well, so the only grain of salt is that Rodney Hood went out in the first quarter with a neck injury, but Rodney Hood always leaves with injuries. Okay, he did it all last year. It just seems to be something that he does. And Utah doesn't have a ton of other places to go for consistent pop. I mean, yes, Joe Johnson can score, right? We know that he's going to do that for them to a certain extent. But they're a really good defensive team with Gobert, with Ricky Rubio, with when they're big, with Favors. Favors isn't as aggressive as he once was offensively, so they desperately need a shot creator like that. And Mitchell is really good at it. I mean, his handle is nice. He's got a jump shot. He can get to the rim. To me, I view him a little bit like Kuzma, where he's just good enough where Quinn Snyder's going to have to find ways to get him on the floor and to get him minutes. And so he's somebody else, and I'm assuming you guys are doing the same thing I'm doing. I'm targeting him well ahead of whatever his ADP is, because I think that's the kind of thing that could pay off, more so than getting a year of, for example, like George Hill, or somebody who we kind of know who he is, and yeah, maybe his stats will be decent for a while, but eventually they're going to want to give minutes to De'Aaron Fox. So if I have to choose between Donovan Mitchell and George Hill, even if Hill's favored in a lot of drafts, I'm taking Donovan Mitchell every time.
Yeah, well, and you said your leagues are 14-team leagues, right? That's what you said, right?
Right.
Yeah, those deeper leagues, you're definitely going to be grabbing a guy like Donovan Mitchell, and so taking notice of what he's doing right now and the opportunity that could be there, and the fact that Rodney Hood's had so many injury issues too, or failed to kind of be consistent, there's going to be an opening for Donovan Mitchell at several points this season for him to step up, definitely.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should have mentioned that earlier when Josh asked me who else is impressed, because he's up there. And then I want to add this too. I get it. Everybody knows Rudy Gobert. I'm sure he's going really high, but don't for a second think that his production is going to drop because Hayward left. He looked fantastic. He almost had 30 points. He's still blocking everything. He's rebounding everything. I believe he's a Western Conference All-Star, even in this crazy deep conference, because I think Utah is going to be in a good playoff position. So I'm super high on Rudy Gobert still, and I don't want people to have any hesitation drafting him high.
No, he looked fantastic in that other game, and people say, "Oh, he's got no offense," and that's completely not true. He was dominating offensively. Rubio is going to set him up for everything. He's a real chance to push towards 17, 18 points per night this season, and block 2.5 shots, get 13, 14 rebounds, and shoot 65% from the field. Like, he's going to put up that sort of level of numbers. The free throws are a concern, we know that, but he is a really, really strong target in fantasy.
Yeah, I was almost going to go the other way. I think his free throw stroke looks pretty good. You could probably look it up while we're talking what he shot from the line last year, but I think that he's definitely not DeAndre or Andre Drummond, right? I mean, he's not somebody that's going to kill you. And if I recall, it wasn't that bad. I don't know, Kyle, if you can look it up even while we're talking, but it was, to me though, this is in my 2 leagues, and I don't know how you guys do it. I like to go with free throws made as opposed to free throw percentage, because I don't know. It's one of those things that bugs me when you can't have DeAndre or Drummond on your team, because they're going to destroy your whole category. So I turned my leagues to free throws made instead of percentage, like many years ago.
In a free throws made setting, Gobert is fantastic because he goes to the line so many times. Like he was there 6 times per game last season. He shot 65%, which is it's not Drummond's 35, it's not Jordan's 40 odd. But the fact that he goes to the line so many times means that he has a pretty significant negative impact in free throw percentage. But as you said, if you're looking at free throws made, the amount that he goes there, and he's going to go to the line more often this year because he's going to just have the ball in his hands more often as well, I believe. So I think he's going to go to the line quite a bit, and that can be a real negative there. But it helps in the free throws made situation.
I think he'll get up into the 70s this year, so maybe it won't hurt you quite as much. But you're right. It's kind of like it's the inverse of why I love having somebody like Kevin Durant on my team so much, or LeBron, because they're taking so many shots, but yet they're still making over 50%. Or Steph Curry too, even though Curry had a weirdly for him down shooting year last year. If you can get one of those guys, which I won't be able to tonight, your field goal percentage has a much better chance of staying high than if you get DeAndre Jordan, who's only taken 8 shots. So it seems like it's helping you a lot, but it doesn't really as much as you think.
Mike, I reckon we could talk fantasy all day with you, but you do have to get to Lakers practice. You need to get all that information out on Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram and Kyle Kuzma, the future MVP of the league, so everyone can go and check out your reports there on Twitter at Lakers Reporter. Thank you for coming on and speaking to us and giving us the inside word on the Lakers and discussing your obsession. Maybe that's too harsh a word, but obsession with fantasy basketball.
No, it's good. Yeah. Obsession is fair. And look, Josh, maybe I'll have to add you to the DMs that I slide into, because I'll definitely be up in Kyle's during games, seeing if he has any tips.
Yeah, definitely. Just, hit us both up, and we'll be there just watching things and giving some potential words of advice. Definitely happy to do that, Mike. And it was great to have you on. Go and follow Mike on Twitter at Lakers Reporter, and you can get all that information on Lakers practice and everything throughout the season. Mike's one of the best in the business at doing that. So thank you once again, Mike, for coming on.
All right, guys, my pleasure. Enjoy it. And I always do enjoy when I go on to one of the sites, Basketball Monster or Roto World or RotoWire or whatever, and it's got my little my Twitter handle for an injury update for fantasy. I do like I don't care if I get credit for anything else, but in terms of fantasy, then I want to be linked there, because I actually play fantasy basketball, so I like it.
That's awesome, Mike. We love you. Thank you so much, and
right,
we love that you love fantasy too. So that's the dopest. See you, buddy.
Yeah, people sleep on fantasy basketball, man. Fantasy football's fine, but basketball is for the real folks of us.
You are absolutely preaching to the choir.
All right, guys.
Thank you, Mike.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Kyle, that does it. Mike Trudell on the show. Some great information there about the Los Angeles Lakers. Lots of intrigue with our team. I'm currently trying to set minutes for teams for daily rotations and stuff. And the Lakers, along with the Miami Heat, which I'm going to talk about that in one sec, they're one of the hardest teams to work out, because how the hell, how can I give 48 minutes to Kyle Kuzma? That's a question that's really bothering me.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't know if we really know exactly what's going on. Was Randall getting put on the bench these last 2 games just to light a fire underneath his butt too? Because he fits so well next to Brook Lopez, especially if Lonzo Ball's in there, and Randall gets out and runs. And I mean, I know they said they don't want him getting the rebounds and then running out with it, which I think is kind of silly, but. You know what? That's in transition is where Lonzo Ball is his best. That's where he facilitates his best. It's not in the half court. It's more in transition. So you do want the ball getting into Lonzo's hands so he can do those quick up the court passes, kind of like the way you see Milos Teodosic do things as well.
I did mention the Miami Heat because something, as we were recording, has just come through that Rodney McGruder is going to be out for the next 3 to 6 months with a stress. Exactly.
Shit.
Sorry.
That's so rude.
That's exactly, because I was looking at this rotation. They're going to start. They're going to start McGruder. They're going to play him 20 minutes, and I don't know what's going to happen with their other 6 wings. So I feel bad for Scooter, but now it just clears things up. Joshie Richardson.
Thank God.
Bang,
now they can
let's go.
start Wayne Ellington. Oh.
at least they can give him more than like 5 minutes a game because there wasn't going to be any playing time. So this bumps Richardson up. It gives Winslow some minutes back. Look, this is huge in terms of sorting out the morass of minutes on the wing there for this team. And it's bad news for Magruder. It's great news for all these other Heat wings, though. So that has just come down. So I'm just about to wrap this up and go and update everything over on Basketball Monster. Kyle, what did you just wrote an article for the site?
Yeah, yep. No, I just wrote up the official points league expert draft that we had on Monday night. I wrote that up. It's you did, you kind of broke it down a little bit in your podcast, but I think I'm a little bit more cheerful in my article about the points league and the possibilities for it. Like, I think it's interesting that there's going to be a strong correlation between year-long and DFS because if you're playing season-long fantasy and you guys adopt this official points league system that the NBA has endorsed, then you're going to always have a perspective if you're picking up somebody of what their expected point output will be. So then you can go on to FanDuel and be like, oh, okay, I see this guy costs this much versus this guy costs that much. And you can kind of see the difference in prices and the expected points that they'll score and all that kind of stuff. And you're going to have a better understanding of both games. If you're playing DFS and somebody asks you to get into a season-long league, you can be like, well, can we do the same, the official scoring stuff? Because then it's just going to be easier for you to get into the rhythm of playing in a season-long league. So I like all that cross-appeal kind of crap. So
I'm totally on board with that. I love this standardization. I love the DFS integration. I love all that. But look, maybe this was just me, and I was talking about this yesterday. But when I was doing the draft, I just didn't feel the rush. I didn't feel the stress of like, oh my god, I need this guy. I've got 3 centers, and if you assholes will take 3 of them, what am I going to do with this next pick? I'm going to have to pivot strategy. It was just like, all right, well, this guy's gone. I'll just take the next guy who's projected at 0.2 points per game less. Like, I didn't feel like any urgency. I didn't feel any anxiety. I didn't feel like screaming at the computer going, oh, you fucking bastards, what are you doing? I didn't feel any of that sort of thought process. I was just like, all right, I'll just grab the next guy. Big deal. Doesn't matter.
Right. When you're looking at the value column and it's the value based on the 8 categories for that player and their position in the league and all that kind of stuff, it's a good reference point, but you still need to have a good understanding of what categories that player is best in and all that kind of stuff in a head-to-head league, in a categories league. Whereas when you're looking at the rankings and the value column for a points league, it's kind of disheartening how close everybody is.
Oh, they're so
in
close
their
to
output.
each other. It's so close.
And
you have like 10 guys between 25 points and 24.5 points per game.
And you sit there and you're watching the draft go by, and you'll fill up your queue, and every single time you put a guy in the queue, somebody else is taken out of it, and you're just kind of sitting there going like, well, this is weird.
Yep.
Because everybody's working off the same stuff. Like, you're just filling your positions. And
Exactly.
so I mean, it is kind of more hollow, I guess, or shallow, I guess you would say.
Yeah, and that was, I just didn't feel that rush of like, panic or the time is running down. What am I going to do? What am I going to do with my strategy? I've lost these guys, blah, blah, blah. Like I just went, all right, who's the next guy? Oh yeah, this looks all right. I need a forward. I'll just take him. And that's just the way that I felt as that draft was going down. Again, plenty of people love points leagues. I'm having an argument with someone on Twitter at the moment about the strategy of a points league draft. But yeah, it just doesn't work for me. But I totally understand the NBA doing it, and I'm 100% behind them doing it and putting this standardization out. And if it gets more people into it, absolutely fantastic. And I think that it 100% will do that. And I couldn't be more supportive. But for me, it's just not my preferred format, and that's fine.
One way that you can take the points league draft and make it much more interesting is turn it into an auction. Because then you actually have to judge by, like, oh, how much of my budget am I spending on this player? And the funnest, or I would say the most frustrating points leagues that I've ever been in have been ones that have restricted rosters. So it'll be like you draft 10 players, it's an auction, there's only 5 active roster spots, and it's point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center. And so there's a limited amount of players being drafted at each spot, and like judging, it really does put the positional kind of perspective is very, very important. You're going to have to build a team based on who's available and try to fill your 5 active roster spots with the best people. Otherwise, I mean, I've gotten stamped out of those leagues because other people just think through their process a lot better than I did going into it, because I assumed it was going to be simple and easy, and they were like, nah, man, it is more complex here. But that was an auction, and they knew who they needed to buy and who was going to be left with depth at certain positions to be able to stomp me out later.
Yeah, the position eligibility, it's probably one of the biggest factors in points leagues, is being able to fill those positions. And I understand there is that level of strategy with that as well. Kyle, I'm going to go and check out this Rodney McGruder news and try and sort out these heat rotations now. I assume you're going to go and do the same thing, and I'll speak to you soon.
Hey, thanks for this, Josh. I love you, buddy. This was a good podcast.
It was good to have Mike on, and thank you, Kyle, for setting that up and for having him. Thank you for being so sexy that he was able to slide into your DMs and hit you up there. That was really much appreciated.
Hey, you know what? He's awesome. He offered to do it, so that just big ups to Mike. And I think he was kind of a little bit excited to come on and just talk fantasy, and like that was the coolest. How he legit is into it, which is just freaking awesome. So anyways, and it's cool to hear that he's getting other people into it too. So
there are quite a few NBA media people who are involved in it now. I talked about Rod Beard on yesterday's show, is trying to pick it up. There are a few other guys that I'm aware of that I've spoken to across the NBA landscape who are getting into it or who are into it as well. So it is definitely picking up there. And once, if the media starts getting into it, then they can start dropping little parts and pieces into things that they write or talk about and getting other people involved, and that does help as well. So that is it's good news to see that sort of stuff happening across the NBA landscape. Don't forget, guys, to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, and Spotify. And as of today, the podcast is no longer on Audio Boom. If you're listening to this, you probably know that. But if you were listening directly on the Audio Boom site, you need to go across to Panoply on Megaphone. I'll tweet links out to it there. That's where it'll be housed. If your subscriptions will all automatically be updated, but we are moving across to a new host site for the podcast, so no longer on Audio Boom. Kyle, thank you once again.
Thank you, Josh.
We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Corey Brewer.